All right, we are live. Welcome to the Home Services Summit webinar series, where all of our content, everything we talk about, has to do with franchising in the home services industry. My name is Scott Abbott, one of the co-founders of 5 Star Painting and the CEO of ProNexis. Our mission at ProNexis is to transform the customer experience in the home services industry through voice, chat, text, and instant booking. Okay, so format real quick. I'll be doing an interview with Lane, a good friend over the years, on talking about specifically events, and he's got a big event coming up here in the fall, which I'm looking forward to attending personally. I've made it to most of the Springboard events. I think every one of the UnConference events he does in March of each year in Utah. And, Lane's got a ton of experience in this industry, but before we jump into hearing more from him and the topic is today, I'll just kind of plug our next webinar, which is happening on September 2nd. We've got Janaya Bailey, who's the CEO of FriendNet, coming on to talk about what's going on in the world of brokers and how to make your relationship with FriendNet successful, some tips on selling more franchises, as well as something that's going on in general around lead generation and what to expect around close rates. Okay, so let me go ahead and introduce Lane. If you haven't met him yet, which would be almost impossible because he's like the most networked, connected guy in franchising. Lane's been in private practice since 1989. He currently represents over 200 franchise brands in the business transactions and complex franchise litigation. And he's been serving as his second 6-year term as a member of the board of directors of International Franchise Association. He's a frequent speaker at franchise events and has been written extensively on the aspects of franchising and has a lot of knowledge, obviously, about home services. We had a great conversation backstage before we went live here, and there's lots of great content that we'll all dive into here in a minute. Lane, welcome to the show, and thank you for giving us some of your time.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today.
So I'll just kind of share this with you, Lane. You may not remember this even. About, I want to say 13 or 14 years ago was the very first time I ever went to an IFA. And, back then, they had this kind of like a new member tag they'd give you. Little sticker would sit on your, your little name tag. And they had a little session that was for new members. And it was, you were leading, welcome to the IFA. Let me talk to you about how to make the most of your IFA experience. And you went through some networking tips and tricks and how to make sure you make the most of the IFA. And I thought, wow, what a nice man. And I felt very welcomed. And you made sure you said hi afterwards. And who would have known that over the years now, it's been a long time. And then a few years after that, you started the UnConference in my home state of Utah. So I've had the great privilege of attending most of those events. And the one thing I've just kind of stood in awe and watching you and how you operate is how amazing you are at networking and making people feel comfortable and welcome at events. And you thoroughly enjoy, and I can tell by your passion for talking backstage, you thoroughly enjoy putting on these events and making them fun and rewarding. So let's just kind of talk about maybe because you organize, let's go through them. How many events do you organize each year right now? Let's name them.
So we have 4 events that we put on not quite every year, and especially COVID has jammed that up a little bit. But we have our original event was UnConference, which you identified earlier, which has always been in Park City, Utah. We were at the 2020 UnConference event when the notifications came through on everybody's phone about first your dry cleaning was going to be 10 minutes late, and then basketball was canceled. You know what I mean? Like, it was pretty, in orders of magnitude, it was pretty crazy. But we had 130 people all dealing with now a crisis situation. All our programming went out the window that we planned for. But every one of those people wrote me afterwards to express gratitude for the ability to network and talk to other folks that had a little bit more experience and maybe more legal help and in how to deal with a franchise system, post COVID or as COVID was happening. So, so the first one's UnConference, and we've done that. We're not going to do it. We didn't do it in 2021. Our next event will likely be 2022, but maybe we're still trying to get that slotted. Part of pulling one of these things off is figuring out when you could execute it that people could actually come without treading on other things that we know are important to them. So that's part of the game. So we've done that event since 2010. And then for the last 9 years, we've done, and that event isn't content heavy, as you know, it's relationship heavy. We do enough in the morning to get people talking about the things that matter, but really leave them on, to their own devices on the slopes or in other our other events to follow up. It was important to me that we had an event that had more content, that gave help at the emerging level or the new franchisor level where a lot of the mistakes were being made. And so we wanted to create an event that was geared especially to those new folks and that had a lot of content more like a typical event. And that's when we started Springboard. So this is the 9th iteration of it, which occurs on September 27th and 28th in Philadelphia this year. And then we have in the past also done a UnConference, which is a warm weather version of the UnConference event. And we last did that, I think, in 2017 in Florida. Yeah. And then our most recent event is our UnConference, where we're trying to create alignments among new, young thinking brands and younger folks in those brands, the next leaders of franchising, and mostly around digital, because digital created the inversion of young people smarter than older people, right? Experience no longer mattered. It was really age did give you more, at least the perception that you knew more about digital marketing. So we thought the best way to align with those folks was to try to get them early on and then try to grow with them as they grow into bigger positions in franchisor. So that event is occurring at the very beginning of November 1 and 2 in Fort Lauderdale.
So 4 big events. I have had the privilege of attending 3 of those. I think I'm young-minded enough to make the cut. I don't know. Yeah. I think I applied last year and someone said, no, Scott, you're too old.
Nobody said that.
That is starting to happen. I'm not that far away from getting my senior citizen card, but I know that I've had some people from my team attend the UnConference last year, and they said it was awesome. But I want to just remind everyone who's listening, Lane is not in the full-time business of putting out events. He's actually at Fisher Zucker, one of the founders of that firm. He's a franchise lawyer, attorney. He's got a great team of professionals, but he's putting on these amazing events. And what I want to know, Lane, is what happened? Like, when did that light switch turn on when you came on and said, I'm going to start putting these together? Like, what made that happen?
So a little bit by accident, right? So they were doing, I'm not a real, truth be told, I'm not a great skier, and I'm not a lover of skiing, being cold, or any of those things. And really, Brad, who's also, you didn't mention, but Brad Fishman from Fishman PR is the co-sponsor of all these events.
Of course, yes.
He and Scott Lair and Paul Rocchio, those 2 folks from the International Franchise Association and some others, did an annual ski event to Park City. And I went with them one time, and I thought, people had come to our dinners, and we had a pretty decent following at the events that we went to, but I wondered whether people would actually travel with us. And we sort of pulled it together quickly, expecting a very small turnout, and got like 75 people in that first year. And what became obvious was that a personal relationship with a prospect was much dramatically different than, meeting somebody at a refreshment break at an event, right? You were talking to them, and they're, skiing is the great equalizer. Not everybody is a great skier or as good at skiing as they are at franchising. So it just created a great way to get to know people personally. And then getting to know people personally, at least for us as lawyers, converted into friendships and then engagements and long-term relationships. But it was that realization that you needed to have a connection to people outside of the work that you do to accelerate your own progress. So that was sort of pushed us into it, and we just ran with that event for probably 3 or 4 years, growing it each year and being shocked at sort of the new faces that turned up every year and how many people ski. But that's how we got into it, Scott.
And I think that let's just go ahead and just highlight, because I went to, I think, one of the events when we had like 16 people or 20 people at the very beginning of UnConference days. And back then I went because I love snowboarding, and it's in Utah, so it was very convenient, right? But it quickly became one of my favorite events of the year. It was something I looked forward to because of how you brought together snowboarding and skiing, which is one of my passions, with people, which is also another one of my passions, connecting with other people and getting to know other people. And, to give people a sense of, how big these go, how many hundreds of people attend the UnConference and Springboard event each year?
The Springboard event gets around, pre-COVID, our numbers were around 500, and UnConference got about 150 or 160, but a third of them were new every year, which was an anomaly we couldn't get our arms around. Like, why would you ever stop doing it if a third of the people, if it recycled itself, right? Because different congregants means a different, session. So that was sort of how our metrics went. So they weren't huge events, but we also weren't like trying to sell out all the sponsorships and all those things that other people do, which create a higher concentration of suppliers or other people. We principally tried to bring franchisors together because when you ask them, they wanted an opportunity to meet people a lot, and way ahead of them in the food chain. That's sort of the moniker that we coined. And they wanted to talk to people that were similarly situated. And so we wanted to make sure we provided a vehicle for that. We got a lot of credit for providing the venue, but like it was people like you. And then we leveraged people like you. I don't know if you remember me calling you and saying, I'm finding a lot of Utah franchisors that aren't on anybody's radar. And like you were the ultimate nucleus of that connection to all those people that I used your name and sort of wrangled them all in, but they turned out to be a huge local community. That all joined and came and and that community grew and grows each year. So there's a lot of silos that you have to work in order to have an event that's well populated. One of them is the local silo, and so
and I think just to bring this up as well, like at the UnConference, for example, not everyone that goes is skiing or snowboarding, right? There's snowmobiling. There is I think there was a tour of a brewery in Utah. There's yoga, and I know there's a mix of different activities. Maybe what would be nice, Lane, is kind of talk about when you put off on these events, how do you balance that, that personal connection element that's not, at a table talking business, but having a personal connection with actually providing, educational value or networking? How do you kind of think about when you pull those agendas together? How do you think about those things?
We try to find items that are of common interest to all of our attendees. We try to not treat like that programming is optional. Like we really want people to come to that programming between 8 and 10 in the morning. And then most of the people, 2/3 do ski and sort of go off to the mountain. And I see there's a friend of ours who's a very successful franchisor, but you might remember this as I do. He would like stake out the bottom of the chairlift, waiting for someone that he heard speak earlier in the morning to jump on the chairlift with them. You remember that?
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm talking about? But I mean, and it was not uncommon to see 3 or 4 people at the bottom of the chairlift trying to find get the opportune moment to ride up with people. So, I mean, like, we gave lots of opportunity for networking, not sure if people would take advantage of it, and then saw people really taking advantage of it. And then the lunches, and everybody was voluntarily like meeting up at a certain time. And you know how that is after skiing and the exhaustion and, maybe weather and everything else. You're never more tired and more like approachable than when you're sitting at that table. Do you agree? Outside with the snow falling.
Yeah.
And so we left people to their own devices, but we always treated the morning like it was important. We always offered programming that we thought was compelling. And we always try to get everybody to at least say something, right? In the notion of that you participate in something, you like it better and you rate it better. And we had some great people, Scott, if you remember along the way. Like you had asked a question in the backstage about speakers. And I've always toyed with paid speakers because there are some people I have access to that are super expensive that I think would be great. But by and large, the best speakers we have are ones that we've groomed out of our own audience, are people like the founder of Arby's, or like, I'm trying to think of all the other people. The speakers have been so compelling, like Bedros Keuilian from Fit Body Bootcamp talking about their digital marketing strategy and being totally candid about it, right?
Yeah.
People didn't move from those seats. Or Charlie Chase ran a bunch of those sessions, where people just don't move. Nobody's on their phone and nobody's walking out the door, because that's like the one way to blow it, right? To have 2 agendas when you go to something that's got a networking component. Your work and the networking, and then the networking never actually happens. Mm-hmm. So, but we had compelling programming in the morning and just enough of it, because if you want the highest level people, we discovered early on, they were not hungry for another 2 hours of information, regardless how good it was. They were looking forward to the ski element of it and to catching back up with friends from prior years and those kind of things. So, but we had to be really disciplined about it. And that's why instead of trying to fit the programming into an event that wasn't geared for it, we created the other, the new event and direct all the programming to it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, at Springboard, I mean, we're working on, so I we looked at the 2019 schedule and program and then threw it away and said, now let's talk about this in a way, knowing what we know now, knowing people were zoomed out, knowing people were really interested in being entertained, right? They like fun element of it, and they like the interaction element more than they ever had in the past. They came often to learn, is what they said to us, but now they want to talk to people and chat.
Yep.
And so, it's keeping your eye on that, actually doing surveys and calling people and listening, right? A lot of people don't do a great job listening, especially as you're trying to fine tune or course correct, just a tweak here and there. They think everything that they're doing is perfect, and you have to always listen to your audience, and you have to understand what it is that makes them tick. And I think that whole world has changed now. And I think that this programming we went through, like, it's topically, brokers, acts, or salespeople, liabilities, joint employer. It's those same topics that we've been talking about, but it's all with a bend toward coming out of COVID and where we are now. Like, joint employer is a topic that we've always talked about, but now with the staffing crisis, and I hope I hope there are people on the call that aren't going through it, but I haven't met any. In other words, everybody's having challenges with staffing, and every franchisor is trying to be more helpful. And that, in and of itself, puts itself in the crosshairs of potentially joint employer and other things like it. But all of the topics are totally present and red hot. So that's why we don't release this program till a month earlier, because you don't even know who the cool kids are. And then the question is, now that things have been done for a while, who are the cool kids, and how do you find them? How do you find the people that are willing to share and that have actually made some strides? And I think, we sent Zach Fishman and Ryan Hicks used the Modern podcast as a vehicle to send them out to interview people to try to find out what was working. And they did it in 2019. They did it about a month ago. And we ended up developing a lot of new speaker talent and new people that aren't on every program and you've never heard of before, even from companies you might have never heard of before, but that were doing things that were innovative and cool and shareable. And so, that's the key. Anybody can put the topics down and make them sound really boring, because topic descriptions are themselves really boring, but it has to sound like it's 2021's answer, not 2019's reiteration, right?
I want to double click on that for a little bit, Lane, because I think you touched on a few things that are really important. And just before I do, I want to remind all the listeners, as we go along, feel free to go ahead and put in the comments section on the YouTube channel any questions you've got. Those kind of stick there, and we'll go to those at the end of the interview that we do here in about 30 minutes or so. So Lane, let's talk about some of the things that you just mentioned. For example, you've got a team traveling the nation, interviewing with founders and franchisors across the country, and you're pulling in talent, speaker talent, new content, which can be extremely valuable for all of us. And backstage, we were talking about how successful Springboard has gone so far around registrations and how many people have already signed up for this event. A lot of people really want to get back to in-person connecting, and and clearly Springboard is one of those ways to do that. One of the things you mentioned was how you promoted Springboard, and for those of you that follow Lane on Facebook or on Instagram, you may have seen some of these. Maybe just talk to that a little bit, Lane. How does that work for you? Why did you start to do it? How should and specifically as a franchisor, how can we start getting better engagement with our franchisees at our annual conventions, right? And I think you can unlock some of those secrets for us and what you've been doing with your events.
Sure. I mean, I appreciate that you're calling them secrets. It's, you fumble with something and then you're like, oh my God, that worked, right? It might even surprise you. So, as I said earlier, we think that the most alluring element is the ability to entertain people. And you're trying to stand out. Everyone's going to be launching or is launching their own in-person events and whatever their next iteration is, but they kind of get lost in the shuffle. You get an email, it's long, it's not, that's the principal way people promote these things. And so early on, we saw the success on TikTok and other of those social media channels with video, and everybody knows video is obviously great. We went through a campaign where we asked people to change into their Springboard shirt and send us videos of that change that we incorporated into promotions. And we probably got 100 of them, Scott. I mean, 100 people, like CEOs, went and this thing where you're in your street clothes and then music plays and boom, you're in your Springboard t-shirt. But we were shocked at the level of people that were also interested and willing to have fun with us. And once you're then having fun with us, then it's like, people do follow along. And so I don't know if any of you have seen my face swap promotions for Springboard. And those which, look, they're personally embarrassing. I'm a professional. I stand in front of a judge. I wear a suit and tie, right? I don't come in like some bozo. But when you get 2,000 views in 48 hours on something, you have to say to yourself, and it's long, so people are watching it to the end, like something about that just worked. And so then it was like, well, how do you exploit it? How do you get people to talk about it and share it and interact with it and interact with you about your event, right? Because that's the stuff other people see. And I don't know how we got the ingredients mixed right, but we didn't do. And I've heard some of the other professional conferences sort of be like, I'm not doing TikTok videos, like it's beneath them, and it may be beneath me. But if you want to get into the minds and hearts of your audience, you have to find some way to entertain them or to catch their attention so that they, in our case, Scott, register, right? We never went out with this registration more than 2 months out. And now nearly 2 months out, I think we're at 360 or something.
Uh-huh.
And mostly franchisors, because we have all sorts of limitations on suppliers, and I think we've even cut off supplier registration. And I think this Friday, the early bird special ends, making the cost go another $50 up. But we are elated. We've never been at the level that we are, because most people do September travel in September. That's when they book it. That's when they go do it. But we put up a block of 20 rooms because we've exhausted our room block now twice. And then the new 20 rooms are gone in a nanosecond. So we seem to have a lot of people, not only that we're engaging with, but also, we have our constituency like you. And we know everybody, certainly in this home services space, but I wouldn't limit it nearly there. And we go and leverage you and other brokers and other people that have multiple clients like us and other suppliers to try to, get everyone pointed to the same direction in terms of recommending that people register. So all this early interaction netted us way ahead of where we were in the past. Now, people have asked, are we getting notes from people now that the Delta variant has done whatever it's doing? And I know that's probably only a week old, but we really haven't. I told you in the backstage that I had, Canadians were concerned about the borders opening, so we were having trouble recruiting them. But they were asking, we got a whole bunch from yesterday wanting to know if they could apply it somewhere else. They didn't want to be closed out. They didn't want to miss it. So
now I can't help but as you're talking about this, Lane, I can't help but just kind of pose the question to listeners who are in the business of franchising. What if we approached our annual event or reunion or summit that we do for our own brands the way that Lane and Brad approaches their events, right? They look at it as, people are paying. I don't even know what I pay to come to your events, Lane, because it doesn't matter to me. The value is there, right? So whatever it is, I just pay that number. But we have all of our franchisees who we want to see every year. We would love to see 95% of our franchisees come. I think almost all of us have in our agreements that they have to attend, right? So they're kind of forced to attend. But what if we kind of flipped it on its head and said, what if we created such amazing entertainment and engagement and marketing to the event that people can't wait to register? That when you get to early bird status, 365 people, we're in the middle of a pandemic, Delta variant's still out, but people are calling from Canada, wanting to register, wanting to be there. They don't want to miss it, right? Being in a situation where franchisees feel like, I don't want to miss the event. And you pointed to something that I think could be valuable to all of our listeners here. And I look at one of our events we had at Fisher Painting at our convention, we would have these fun video contests where they would do some song and some dance, and they won trophies and some prize money. We made and had some fun with it, right? Creating an element of entertainment and fun with each other at an event creates really strong bonds and connections that people want to come back to, right? Lane, maybe talk to, when you're looking at Springboard, for example, in the fall here, the 365 people, how many of those people have attended your event in the past?
That's an interesting question. I didn't look at that for this call. I see a lot of new names and a lot of new people, but I also see a lot of old friends and family. I'll have to circle back with you on that. Okay. I want to remind people, Scott, you got to tell the story. So I got Scott Abbott to put a toga on, which he made out of a tablecloth or two, to participate in a group exercise for a new franchise entity Well, not only did I get Scott, I got every member of his team to wear a Julius Caesar headband. Like, not that I asked them to, but these are such a group of type A people, all of us that come to the event, right? Nobody's going to be like overshadowed by somebody who tried harder to be more funny, funnier, or to be more creative. And the level of creativity and the bar went up year after year after year. But people, I remember there was what was the one that involved a dog franchise where they went to the Rittenhouse Square and borrowed somebody's dog and walked it into our presentation? People are crazy. And it's done like really on the fly. Like, you don't have a whole lot of time to go put together. It's not a thing like who could put together the best ad campaign, because that's for an agency and for lots of time. This was more like on the fly. What could people do working together with people that never worked together before? But that has always been incredibly successful and really hard to pull off, because it's hard to convince people. It's hard to get people to do the thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a group act. It's the thing. They're like, well, wait, I got a call to do then. Like, you could certainly corroborate that the best friends you have are your teammates from those prior years that you really got to know in that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the toga thing. So let me talk to you a little bit about Springboard 2021, Springboard Live, as we're calling it, because we have really tried to look at what we did last time and the reasons we did it, and then try to figure out how, if any way, we could make it better. And what we heard from everybody is they wanted more opportunities to network and meet people, more than in any year before. And so we've been using the word schmingle as a way to describe this event, because it's intended now to create as much interaction, social and professional, as possible. So in the old days, 2019, we had like an end of event session that would be the roundtable session. It would be probably the big roundtable session. But in talking to people, they really wanted to have more collaborative discussions about their own problems. They've been listening for a year and a half to other people's problems and solutions, but they really wanted time to do that. So we took all of our workshops, we made them substantially longer. We created panelists that are principally franchisors that are talking for a short period of time, trying to lay the foundation for the exercise to follow. But then with a roundtable component, and a roundtable that's personal and professional, with the goal of, at the end of that first day, when I think there are 2 of our roundups, they used to be clinics, but they will have roundtable components, and there's at least 3 iterations of the workshops, and they will have roundtables. So by the end of the first day, with not even including the meals, people will have had an opportunity to meet 50 or 60 people, and we think that's the way to charge the battery, sending people into the night function, the soiree, as I called it to you, but the evening function, and to give them an opportunity to exploit the contacts and connections they made all day. So, and so we've been using this word schmingle. I don't know if I'm allowed to use it on the program, but it's intended to create this interaction at every specific juncture and to create as much personal contact as possible, because that's what people have told us that they want. And so, we think it's going to be, we think we're giving them exactly what they want. But I have a feeling it will work. I don't think people want to be spoken at or to. I think they just keep telling us more collaborative, more talking. I don't want to sit and listen to people. I don't need pinned in rooms for hours. And so, but we think this is going to create the best potential for interaction and give both parties, the franchisors and the supplier sponsors and the people, lots of opportunity to meet folks, which I think you even told me is really important as this goes on.
Yeah, and you highlighted something that's really important there, right? I think a takeaway for our listeners as they're planning their own annual events, right, is that you've actually structured your agenda to enable what is one of the most valuable things in your event, which is connecting people with new people to get new ideas and personal connections that are lasting, right? So having content happen earlier on where people can get to know each other a little bit, but then have those social functions later on in the evenings where they can start to have some fun with one another. Clear that is, and on that topic, Lane, in all your years of attending events, being a part of events, organizing events, and all the feedback you're getting, where do you see you get the highest ratings on any learning format? Like, are the breakouts the most effective? Roundtables the most effective? What do you maybe give us a sense of what you've heard in terms of feedback as the most valuable thing that people get from an event like yours?
I think it's the contacts and the connections and the networking opportunities. And I think that's in large part because our events are break-even events. In other words, we spend all that comes in and we don't, go for the cheapest chicken dish in the dark conference room. We take people off site. We sequester a whole restaurant or a whole museum or a whole whatever to make the destination really something special and alluring, and then having the people come, participate and stay voluntarily for the duration. Did I answer your question?
I think so. And that's good.
Okay.
Let's talk about what you hit some numbers there. Your approach to these events is it's a break even.
Let me go back for a minute. I also think, we also get very high ratings on some of the keynote speakers that we have that people haven't seen before. Like the Arby's founder was, people couldn't stop rating that amazingly. The roundtables interaction, when people write in their comments, they're always seem to be writing about the interaction and the ability to interact. So I don't know if that's as much networking as us trying to do this. It's not speed dating, but right, you rinse people through roundtables one after another. You're forcing them into personal, growing their personal network. So we get good ratings on that too. Sorry.
So maybe I'll just come back to the speaker piece because I think this is valuable for anyone putting on an event. And you mentioned like if you get a great speaker that's very engaging and on point, they can add a lot of value, right? And I think I asked earlier backstage, how much money are you budgeting to bring in speakers? And through your network lane, it sounds like most of these speakers that are coming to your events are doing it because they know you or they're connected to you and they're willing to do it for free. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, it's even more. It's even narrower than that. Everyone you see who's got a speaking gig at our event pays to attend as an attendee. They register and then they are awarded the speaking gig. There's no people that are brought in from the outside because we just can't see any need to bring until we run out of people that have something to actually teach and say. It makes no sense to go out and hear from some millennial expert that's going to give you the next presentation that he or she gave last time. As opposed to coming to somebody that's had some modest amount of success, and we're blessed in that. So I would, thank you. I have an amazing client base and get to talk to people every day about what they're doing. Brad has a huge following constituency that sort of come up to him, and then we have like the modern podcast and these other tools, and then guys like you will call up and say, "Hey, here's a thing that's like the insurance tool we talked about." Like there's there's just great people that we all need to meet and that need to be part of this community. So. I wanted to get Steven Tyler. I was trying to figure out how to do a Steven Tyler concert at one point and get big sponsors to come in and pay for it. And I actually think that would have been interesting as well, right? For a big sponsor, you could bring your big vendors, your big franchisees to sit in the front row and have a meet and greet. And like to me, but that's a bigger undertaking. And as the world shifted, it made no sense when you were already having great success, at a much lower budget, and people were still elated to speak, not just willing to. I remember Debbie Schwetz from Nothing But Cakes did the keynote on a Tuesday and sold the company on a Wednesday. I mean, most people would have told you they're unavailable. You remember that, right?
Yeah, I do.
But we've never had anyone tell us we're unavailable. They're unavailable. And we try to find brands that, haven't had their story told a million times. And so I think there's amazing people in our own constituency that are of huge interest now. So if I was doing a franchise convention, I would try to find my more dynamic franchisees that are leveraging tools and doing things that are best practices and that are at the top end of the performance scale, and it won't be everyone, right? It won't be like, you have to have a personality and be able to do it. And nobody wants to be slides. Nobody wants to see a lot of slides and a lot of microscopic printing. They want to hear a dynamic and interesting story. And if it's at all like anybody like yours or anyone else's, it's heartwarming to hear because you're trying to get somewhere in your own life and those success stories, and that it looks doable, because a lot of days, franchising doesn't look doable. It looks hard. Right? So making it look and showing the people and the strides that they make, and that some people don't know they're on the 1 yard line when they're on the 1 yard line, right? You don't know without a context. So one thing we think we give people is context, to talk to other people outside of the organization that are in the same, tidal basin they are, against the same current. And so you get some independent thought, because sometimes in a company, you have a leader that nobody says anything other than what the leader says. There's a yeah. And then you have other, it's just different everywhere you go. But if you can bring in all these independent thought leaders that are already respected in the industry, it makes you listen. Because it's like you said it, I'd be like, wow, Scott's doing that. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. right? And go do it. So yeah, there's a way to do the paid speaker thing. And I think depending on what you're trying to do and how big a company you are and what your goals are, and, you know, whether it's to make money or to entertain people or to get PR or to ingratiate yourself with franchisees or what, I mean, lots of different purposes. And I think those would each probably arrive at a different budget, a different kind of entertainment, and a different kind of speaker if you were really in tune with what your audience wanted.
As you were sharing that, Lane, I had two thoughts that came up. One is that how much I've appreciated going to like the IFA, UnConference, Springboard, other events like that, and networked with leaders of other home service brands that have come and spoken at my annual convention. And so by having a really strong network, by going to Springboard, for example, this fall in September, you have a shot at networking with some great leaders. And if you're looking for someone that will come speak at your event, they very likely would do it for free and may call on you to do it for their event. And I'll just kind of put a plug here on this because I've done this enough times where I've had a CEO or a founder come speak at my annual convention. And I kind of connected to, like, I've got 5 kids. My oldest is 21 and my youngest is 11. I have 6 siblings, which means there are, 12 aunts and uncles to my own children. And raising a child is, as I'm sure many of you know, is not easy. Raising a franchisee can be difficult as well. And sometimes you tell a franchisee something, just like you may tell one of your children something, and they just don't listen to you. But they might listen to your uncle or aunt. And I've experienced that this summer where I've heard conversations happen with my siblings, talking with my kids, and them engaging in a way that's really important around how to, become a good human being. And it's the same thing in franchising. If you have someone come to your annual convention that's got all that experience around what it's like to build an amazing franchise system, and then sharing some of those tips to your franchisees, they may listen more effectively to that keynote speaker than maybe what you would share yourself. So I can't speak or say enough about how valuable it will be to network at these events and make sure that you're making those connections and then pulling those connections into your annual convention yourself. If you're looking for some solid talent to help share and get across some key ideas.
Yeah, and as I said before, like a lot of the talent is young, and it's digital marketing. Everyone's talking about digital everywhere you go, and lead generation, franchise sales, in every context in the universe. And so it makes for a very relevant, very great topic.
So before we move on to the next question I got for you, you mentioned that you're about break even on your events. Does that mean, what is it? So if I'm planning an annual convention, what should I be budgeting roughly per person that's attending to put on an event?
So the last time we looked at this, I think it cost us between $800 and $1,000 to actually host somebody, adding, your minimums up, divide the number of people you have, and coming out with a number. And yeah, unfortunately, that's too high a price or freight for many emerging. So, what we did is we use our suppliers. First of all, it costs a lot to sponsor. And then we use that money to defray the cost to franchisees to attend. So right now, the attendance cost is $400 for something that costs $800 to serve you at. So where does that money come from? It comes from the other suppliers who come in. But it allowed us to sort of take out the economic hurdle that we were fearing from the people that we wanted to attract the most, the new brands, the up and coming brands. And so that was just our strategy. I don't know that if we were trying to make money on this or fund our other budgets out of this, if we could have even come close to that. But in terms of trying to get the most people to come out, that's been what works. Now, skiing is a little more interesting. Skiers will pay a little bit more money, and we seem to have more mature brands attend that. And like you just said, you have no idea what it costs. I mean, I could tell you, but it's irrelevant because it doesn't matter to you what it costs. And that's sort of the point. So those people pay, I think, what is it, $750 or what it's been historically to attend the UnConference. But that's our economic model. And I guess if we needed speakers or needed to do other things, we'd have to do something different or sell a lot more suppliers. But as I said, the Holy Grail seems to be keeping the ratio right. So the experience for folks who are there is, as you described, like an ability to network, meet, and mentor with other franchisors like you. They need to encounter those people as you promised. And when they do, it distinguishes your event. My wife used to say to me every time I left for an event, she'd say, "Is this the sucky one where you sit in the lobby all night with the old man?" And I had no idea what event she was talking about, because that was like every event I ever went to. But the fact that was her visceral reaction to my industry events meant that I needed to get at it. I needed to create something. That's sort of why I went to these crazy videos and some of our crazy programming, because I wanted people to be like, is this the one we were laughing so hard at? Or is this the one we had the amazing time at the event? Or when an ate cheesesteak, whatever it is that they remember about it, but they remember something about it other than the way my wife remembers every event she's ever been to. And so, you know, creating the appearance of fun and alluring, you know, people and content, again, it seems to be the
yeah, I think the last springboard I went to, I managed to do a all-night food tour and went to into a sugar coma after having, I think, a cheesesteak, ice cream, I mean, cookies. It was endless food for 4 hours with Marcus Mura and a few other friends. And while we're traveling through Philadelphia, we kept bumping into other springboarders doing exactly the same thing as we were touring, you know, until 2 a.m. Through Philadelphia. Great memories and great fun.
Well, and interesting, right? Because you were a person who decided to, like, you're not a big drinker or any drinker, right? So it's to be at an event where people are pouring even fancy wine, or that's not your cup of tea, right? But there was always a group, not even like a solo person who was lost, but a group who could easily find each other that frankly saw more of Philadelphia than I did living here 10 years, went to almost all the hot spots. I couldn't figure out how people could eat a cheesesteak and ice cream in that quantity, in that time crunch.
Yeah.
But people would come back saying they had the greatest time with you or with whoever else, going and walking around the city. And Philly's pretty colorful and ethnic, so people get a kick out of it. But there's like a spot that everybody fits in, because I always look for outliers. And you asked about this earlier. My events are high touch. If my people see, we call it if they burst out of the universe, right? So they're no longer in the sphere of everybody talking, but they're in a chair by themselves over here. They've somehow ejected, right? So we see those people, and any of my people would do it instinctively because they have that culture. But they immediately go in, and what do you have to do with those people? You have to make 2 introductions, right? And push them back into the circle. But if you constantly do that, and if, you know, speakers want somebody to escort them from the front door, like, you have to have people handy that can do the high touch portions of, you know, of the event and make people feel like they're important to you. And
a great point there again. Like for those of you who are, you know, running annual events, right? There are all kinds of people. There are people who just love networking, and then there may be people who are a little more introverted that need some help. And so, Lane, you brought up a really important point, and that is to have people on your team that can help make connections, introductions, and, as you said, bring people back in so they have engagement. And the other thought is, as you're choosing venues, I mean, Philadelphia at night is a pretty amazing place that also kind of enables those interactions with other people and allow them to connect in a fun way, is, you know, really valuable. Lane, I want to talk to you about some tips that we can get from you, because I know you're negotiating deals with hotels at every one of these events. If I'm planning an event, what should I be aware of? How do you make those hotel contracts work? What outs with COVID, you know, what outs do you have in your contracts in the event that maybe we get shut down that protects you? Because you make a big commitment, right, Lane, on these events where you're committing to a room number, and if they don't get sold out, you're on the hook for those. So maybe just kind of talk about that, tips and tricks around that.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks. So the hotel issue, it's a big issue, right? So we try to have somebody be a point person that actually has experience with doing these for us in the past. In our case, it's our marketing director, and one of our paralegals has really shown skill at negotiating and knowing what, because they always tell you they'll give you what you want, but then you get the contract back, it says nothing like what they just agreed to. So really, it takes forever, right? And then they're followed by what they call BEOs, banquet event orders. Banquet event orders determine your bill, and they're never right in terms of how many seats, how it's configured, and how it's done. And so it's really good to have a person locked and loaded that is running the event, that has that in their mind's eye how it's supposed to get executed, knows what all the different component parts have, and is involved with the hotel staff. And they're not just calling, leaving messages for anyone to call back, but they're calling that person who can conclude that for you. So I was concerned. So I'll talk about COVID first, then I'll talk about what other stuff you get in the contract. I was concerned about COVID, and I have a kick-out clause in my contract. So our event, first of all, I found a venue that had never been occupied. So our W Hotel that our Springboard is at is still not open. There's actually a question whether it will open, but it is not open. It has no cooties from anybody else, right? And it's a number is probably the nicest hotel here, if not one behind the Four Seasons. So we have, but they also have never had an event there, right? They don't have a long history. The people are untrained. So while it's a great and attractive venue, the closer it gets to our event, the less experienced they will be with doing things like event transitions and space layouts and getting stuff in and getting banquets undertaken. So it's so back to COVID. So it was important for us that we had an ability to get out. It was also important to us, I think, in this year because we had a food and beverage minimum that we didn't have like a lot of other contracts with other people. Unfortunately, the venues in the hotel were brand new. So we're going to try to protect ourselves by doing more food and beverage on premises than we've ever done in the past. And then the hotel, of course, can get out if they can't serve us. And so I guess the reality of the world is that I guess if you look at Las Vegas, the mask mandate indoors and outdoors. So I had wanted to be able to cancel the event if you had to wear a mask because I don't want to wear a mask. I'm vaccinated. I would like to not wear a mask. As it turns out, the mask mandate isn't nearly as oppressive in terms of the event going forward as occupancy requirements or maximums, right? If they can't get people in a room and can't serve food and beverage, that would be really detrimental to us. So they can, of course, get out of it with us if they can't do that. But it's basically the protections around it. We had some more creative ones in the early stage of this where we really didn't know. We were trying to like create termination rights when there were large numbers of cancellations or large vacancies in the hotel that were obviously showed it was bigger than our event. The other kind of things that come up in these contracts is, you got to get the concessions you need, right? Like you might find out that Wi-Fi is $5,000 a day, right? And if you don't have a sponsor for it or something, that could really turn your budget upside down. Or free upgrades or VIP amenities, or there are certain elements that I know my team members are focused on trying to maximize what we get versus our spend, and they have the context of all the other iterations of the event that we have and what we've gotten from other people. But we have that institutional knowledge, and my people have done a great job in negotiating these kinds of amenities. But they're really important on the front end, and I think people just sort of like read it over quickly and don't really dig into what they need to be able to have, Wi-Fi for 3 days could be $15,000. That will totally throw your event upside down, right? So if you need it, you got to know about it. If you have VIP people that are speaking that are not being paid, you might want to give them a upgraded hotel room or cover their room or something, you know what I mean? Where you could have that opportunity to do that from the hotel.
And when you do your contracts with, I think there's some good tips here for any one of us organizing our annual events, right? Which is, that you can create some and put some clauses in to protect yourself in the event that COVID shuts you down clearly, right?
Right.
Leveraging sponsors to pay certain bills, like you mentioned, to give your, because I think we've all been to an event where Wi-Fi is not available and it's a real pain and you can't get cell service in the bottom of some hotel. So that's obviously really important. You mentioned you have a team of people that are involved. I mean, you're putting on 3 to 4 events every year. Maybe just talk to us about what does it take to put on 2 or 3 events a year in terms of staffing. Do you have one person that kind of heads up all of your events? Do you organize it differently? Are they full-time, or how much time in advance are you planning things? Just some tips around how to staff it properly.
So we have a marketing person that it takes the laboring war with respect to the event in terms of its execution. But we also have, so that all works until you get to the event, right? Or you have to stuff bags, or you have to assemble items. That requires more hands on deck, very proximate to the event. And then if you're going to be high touch, you need to have people on the floor that are prepared that can identify when somebody's orbiting outside the universe or when somebody needs help or those things. And we have done an amazing job. And I know some of the other event producers do an even better job than we do of having a group of folks that have come for years to work our events, that are willing to, that know our culture, that come back every year. We were just reviewing who would work the event this year, and it was all people that have worked at our events in the past. And so we've never had to really go on the outside. And I don't think there'll be one person at Springboard that wasn't at multiple other events. So people like doing it. We also try to pay them well for that time spent, and show them a good time, and I don't know, so far people still want to keep doing it. But introducing new people is troublesome, and trying to farm it out to a third party to wonder whether they would have the same culture or high touch aspect that we have. I'm like not that trusting, right? I want people who know who they answer to be responsible for delivering the level of service. And it's hard that people, I had somebody say to me, you want me to go literally walk that person to their seat in the room? It's like, yeah, what about that? Do you not understand? Why did you not get that instinctively? Yes, if they want to be walked to their seat, walk them to their seat. If they want to walk to their room, walk to their room. You know, whatever it is. They want their bag, you know, so you see people walking their suitcases around. You're like, hey, why don't you put it in here? You know what I mean? Like, there's just ways to be really helpful if you go out of your way to. And our people are, I don't even have to tell them, Scott, I'm blessed. And you see it at my things. It's like I have you know, people always ask me where I get them that they're so like this mold. And I don't know. We've been truly blessed at people that were just great people that was their event. You got to make the person who's putting on that event own it. It's not your event, but it's our event or their event. And when it's their event, it's a totally different animal, right? Because it's, you know, it's like, wait a minute, you're not doing that to my people. You're not, you know, whatever it is, you know, they just take ownership of it and they really treat it like that.
Yeah. I've had some questions, Lane. I know we've talked, you know, you're the leader of one of the most prestigious law firms, and we've spent almost a full hour talking nothing about events and networking. Lots to learn from you there. But in your trade, in franchising and legal work that you do, what are you seeing that's happening in 2021 and even coming up in 2022 that we should be aware of as a home service franchisor around maybe our FDDs or changes in laws or things we should be concerned about or reflecting about as we get into our renewal season at the end of this year?
So, look, there's a tail that wags the dog, right? I think the staffing crisis is the tail that wags the dog. We can look at it solely from the standpoint of home services, but I'm told that it's every bit as a problem there as it is with fast food or anything else. And it's that issue, right? So that's the issue we find ourselves with that causes franchisees to ask franchisors for more services and franchisors to want to be more helpful in trying to assist with the attraction of new talent, right? But you have joint employer, which usually has franchisors mixing out of those hiring, recruitment kind of activities for franchisees. But when you have a staffing crisis, it inverts the model, right? Getting people to work in the places becomes the most important thing. So, and I have franchisor clients that say to me, Lane, we must help recruit workers for this business because of a compelling business reason. And I appreciate the talking up the joint employer and the risks associated with it, but it's so material to our concept that we need, right? So, and joint employer is never one issue either way, right? It's a series of issues how you find things. But the staffing is just putting a lot of pressure on people to try to do something to help and to try to provide value to franchisees and to try to actually help find workers to work in the franchises, right? So to me, that whole world has changed. I'm trying to, if I told you I knew exactly how and why, I could tell you that we'll know by springboard or we'll know what the present thinking on it is. But that's the idea, and that's how we work on programming. We look at the things that are the same old topics, but why are they important now? And why are they more important now? And what are the other competing concerns? And then we try to get really, really respected and super smart people to talk about their strategies around them and those kind of things. But yeah, so joint employer is still, big. There's a lot of issues with the COVID and defaults on development agreements and other things. There's some people, I will say this. I think the initial investment portion of FDDs, I think things have gotten more expensive to build. So if you're building a brick and mortar type location, I think I think we will see item 7s in FDDs contemplate larger ranges as long as real estate's expensive and the raw materials are non-existent or unavailable. I see some people trying to implement more digital. I see some legacy brands trying to implement technology when they never had it before or had flat royalties to other royalties, to gross sales-based royalties. So like other contractual type stuff, I think the states have taken different positions about how people fared in the recovery and how they portray it in their FDDs. And the short answer being that if you've recovered, you're probably good. If you've not recovered, you probably will have a higher level of scrutiny. And I think understanding how states are treating those applications, especially if you're doing it in-house and your own applications are stalled, and what people are doing to get around it, if anything, right? So I think that's a big issue. I think the PRO Act and organizing, unionizing laborers is going to be a big issue. Matt Haller, as the new CEO and president of IFA, certainly has his hands full with issues to deal with. And me, you, others involved in the FranPack fundraising is really to fund Matt's activities, trying to undertake all that's been given to him. So I think there's a lot going on the, I don't need to tell anybody, right, that the shift in power has changed and created jeopardy among franchising that maybe didn't exist under the prior leadership. And that, there are some people that look at franchises as just like big chain operators or Amazon. They don't look at it as independent businesses, and they think that franchising squeezes the wealth out of people as opposed to the opposite, as opposed to creating wealth. And so IFA has done a huge new study to try to counter the conclusory remarks, around the Labor Department and other places about, attributes of franchising that I don't see. And it may be that it occurs in some very isolated circumstance, but I think that there's a lot of regulation looking for stuff to regulate. And I would tell you that all of those things we're going to bring right to the current moment at Springboard. I think real estate changes have been dramatic, right? Onboarding processes and procedures have dramatically changed. Always the debate on outside franchise sales or brokers, but a lot of stuff going on in operations. A lot of, I was surprised even in 2019, the franchise relations subject matter was like the second best attended behind development. Was even higher than operations and others. It struck me as funny, but it says to me that people are focusing on relations. There are companies that have great relationships and ones that don't.
Yep.
This
has been fantastic, Lane. The lots of gold nuggets here for those who have tuned in and those who will watch afterwards. I just want to also make a plug here again, just on this joint employer piece. I know it's actually impacted me in some of my businesses, and I know that it's become more and more important. If any of us who are trying to hire anybody right now, we're seeing it. Our franchisees are seeing it. I think in the home services industry, it's been around for a number of years, probably 6 or 7 years. It's been a topic at the table with our franchisees about where they can find talent to get stuff done. And one of the limiting factors to their growth has been finding talent. So if, like we had Josh on our show a couple of months ago, he was speaking to the same thing, how he helps his franchisees recruit talent to run their businesses. And so joint employer is important. If you are if you are going to be getting more involved in helping your franchisees find people, you want to make sure you do it right. And I definitely would recommend you get some good advice on that. So, Lane, thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you at the W in September. And I can't wait to get myself one of those Phillies. It's a ton of fun. And thank you so much for participating today.
Yeah, and if anybody hears this and is interested in joining us or wants to come, please write me. If you've conquered any of the obstacles that many of us are all dealing with, we're looking for the people that have that have figured out the code. And so please call me and join our group of exchanging information. But this is how we learn. Folks like you, Scott, tell us, and we get this opportunity to address audiences like yours. But we would hope that folks that would find their way to our Springboard event for emerging franchisors. You didn't ask, but we target it to people 0 to 150 units, but there's not anybody in post-COVID that isn't re-emerging, right? So we have a huge showing of like the larger, bigger brands that have a larger experience curve to share and those kind of things. So again, if anyone wants to join us, please let me know, but I appreciate very much the opportunity to talk about the event today and some of our successes to date.
Awesome. Thanks, Lane. Look forward to seeing you there.
All right, thanks, bye.
Okay, bye.